Welcome to the Time Chronicles. I'm Pigtail Gurl.
I'm Starfire Tor. Join us as we journey beyond the outer limits of your perception.
Beyond the illusion of mainstream reality and beyond the deception and disinformation that passes for truth.
Our podcast is about self-empowerment through ancient, modern, and even future knowledge.
It's also about service to others and saving the planet.
So join us as we reveal the hidden and forbidden secrets of the world, the multiverse, and the core matrix. It's about time.
In this episode of the Time Chronicles, you are going to experience unique and mind-blowing information that is only available to Starfire Tor and Pigtail Gurl here on this podcast.
We're going to show you a real extraterrestrial spaceship or possibly space station that's at least 1 million miles or 1.6 million kilometers from the Earth. We're going to show you an ET display of power as it triggers a solar coronal mass ejection while it's uncloaking on camera. And most amazingly, we're going to show you a video of a planet moving backwards and forwards again as part of a core matrix timeline edit.
And we will also show you how all of these items and events are actually related. So please help others find this podcast so they may journey beyond normal with us. Please share this podcast far and wide. The title of today's show, Earth is in the wrong dominant coexisting timeline. But what does that mean? Where did it all begin? And where are we going? Well, there's no one better to answer those questions than my fabulous and amazing co-host, Starfire Tor, who spends, may I say, hours and hours researching this stuff for you guys. So hello, Starfire. How are you?
Hi, Pigtail Girl. I'm great, and I'm so excited to share this information with our podcast Time Chroniclers. This is going to be great. So to understand how it is that we are in the wrong dominant coexisting timeline, how this is affecting us today and how it affected us thousands upon thousands of years ago, we have to look at what the extraterrestrials were doing on planet Earth in the way back when. So very briefly, thousands of years ago, various ET groups, there just wasn't one, they were terraforming and bioengineering the planet. And this also involved positioning the moon where it is. Now, Pigtail Girl, that's going to be another episode we're going to do about how the ETs put our moon in place.
That will be fascinating. I'm going to look forward to that one.
A little intrigue to let people know where we're going. So over time, as this terraforming and bioengineering went on, these various ET groups just couldn't agree on the next steps and the future of the planet. And this led to a great conflict that was a war. It went on in space. It affected planet Earth. And the end result was planet Earth was destroyed. That means in little pieces, nothing left, just looking like the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Fortunately for us, the core matrix, which I've talked about in many of our past shows, the core matrix is the element that creates all of our timelines. It is a thing that streams the entire universe, because the universe that we're living in now is recreated or resurrected from the remnants of the original universe that we were in before we got kind of sucked into a black hole complex.
I call it the fixer-upper. We're in the fixer-upper universe.
That's exactly what it is. So the core matrix has a prime directive, and that prime directive is to bring our planet, bring the universe. It's just not us. Humans like to think that only Earth is like, the center of everything. Believe me, we're not. But we do think from our position on planet Earth. And so the core matrix prime directive's job is to resurrect our original universe to the best of its ability. It has only remnants to work with. So obviously it can never put us back the way we were. It can only put us back with what it has to work with, which has its limitations.
Understood.
And this is why the core matrix is always doing timeline edits.
It's a bit like having a puzzle that you're trying to put together, or a broken mug, but bits of the mug are sort of fallen under the sink and you can't find them, but you're trying to put the mug back together. But it's never going to be quite the same as that mug that you used to enjoy your tea from.
Exactly. And the core matrix is always coming up with various other combinations using the remnants that it thinks, oh, this is going to fix this. This is going to fix that. I mean, in the blink of our eye or a breath that we take, it might have done in its own way like 1 million coexisting timeline edit trials that we're not even aware of.
So when it's calculating, is it actually manufacturing the coexisting timelines to calculate? Is that what it's doing? Or does it have some kind of, do you think, a brain as like a mechanical brain where it's able to calculate without having to manifest them?
The core matrix is a little bit hard to describe. It's not a being. It's not sentient. It's not a machine. It's more akin to a computer's hard drive. But again, that's very simplistic. It's really not the best descriptive, but it's a good one for us today because so many people have the devices, whether it's a computer, a laptop, notebook, a cell phone, that use this tech that has a hard drive at its core. And we understand streaming. We understand communicating in the internet, which is very basically, this is how the core matrix works. So when it creates these different coexisting timelines, it's creating them. They are real.
Right.
And so it doesn't necessarily stream all of them, but it creates all of them. And what it creates cannot be uncreated. So in that blink of an eye, anywhere from 1 to 1 million or more of these tester coexisting timelines are created as this computer core matrix figures out what's the next best evolution of the last coexisting timeline that it made dominant. And dominant coexisting timeline simply means that this is the timeline that all of our consciousness is invested into.
Right.
Because the core matrix has an assimilation program that makes our brains think that we exist in only a single timeline that has a past, a present, and a future. That's not true. That's an illusion. We exist in every single dominant coexisting timeline that ever existed in which we would have lived. So our brain is made to shelve in a sort of state of amnesia every other coexisting timeline that we had a consciousness in, because our brains just can't handle that.
So we can be existing on many dominant coexisting timelines at the same time.
We do.
Right.
We absolutely do. And in our episode 2 that we did on precognition, prophecy, I explain how that works, that this is where our psychic abilities and our abilities to see the future or past events, this is where it comes from. Our brains are the interface to this core matrix. We have access to it. So we have access to all of that information. But because of the assimilation program, that information is stored so that our brains can handle what it is we are perceiving. But because that assimilation program has glitches, this is how I was able to discover that the core matrix existed. So dominant timelines are by design meant to be the best next case scenario, coexisting timeline that the core matrix prime directive feels improves where we were on our march to becoming whole, something that is not possible, as I explained. Now, going back in time again to the extraterrestrials, when they destroyed the Earth and a lot of the territory surrounding it in the solar system, the core matrix prime directive rebooted us. This wasn't just a timeline edit, which is the core matrix taking this element and that element and rearranging things and bringing new things in and old things out. No, this is a complete resurrection of everything. And when that happens, we get, again, the best case scenario of our dominant coexisting timeline. Not the worst case scenario, but the best case scenario. But somehow, starting a number of years ago, based on the evidence of events happening on the planet, based on all of the timeline edits and all of the evidence for them, the markers and the time shifts that have been happening, it's very obvious that something went very wrong with a reboot. And instead of the core matrix streaming a new dominant coexisting timeline that is a betterized version, we somehow ended up in one of the versions that was a defect, one that would have never been streamed, one that would have never been made a dominant coexisting timeline. And because of that, we find ourselves in the wrong dominant coexisting timeline.
Bizarro world.
Bizarre, yes. You know, I'm a real big fan of Superman.
Me too.
Ever since I was a little kid. And they have part of their comic book series, something called Bizarro World. And in this Bizarro World, these are people who are sort of freakazoid looking humans. The planet, instead of being a sphere or a globe, is squared. And their outlook on life just doesn't make any sense. It's backwards. It doesn't work. And eventually it does destroy them. So I just call this wrong dominant coexisting timeline Bizarro World because, you know, millions of people understand that something's not right.
Yeah, we feel it.
You know, but even if somebody doesn't recognize that there's something just off, it doesn't matter whether they realize it or not. It's off. So we need to go back and look at what happened when the extraterrestrials destroyed the planet. And when the core matrix prime directive kicked off, it triggered it, and we were rebooted. Well, you know, energy cannot be destroyed. And when the core matrix prime directive kicks in, as it has many times over the thousands of years, it has to do something with the energy that caused the destruction that it's rebooting from, such as the war that was waged by these extraterrestrials. So it has a way of doing it by minimizing the energy. It still has to put the same energy back into our resurrected world, but it separates it up into smaller chunks of energy, earthquakes, tornadoes, smaller blasts, you know, you name it, tornadoes, bad weather,
maybe
tsunamis,
volcanoes as well.
Volcanoes, right. Volcanoes are in there. So it separates it up so that it becomes, you know, look, let's face it,
manageable.
Those are not nice. Those are not right. Those are not nice things to have happen, but they're the lesser of the problem.
Yeah.
So this kicked off what's called a time loop. What the extraterrestrials did thousands of years ago started a time loop that we are having to deal with today. And this time loop is that even though the core matrix has separated out and reportioned this terrible energy that destroyed our planet and part of the solar system, it can always regenerate back into any dominant coexisting timeline if human beings themselves recreate the conditions that can destroy the planet. And for us these days, that's nuclear. So when you get into the situation of being in bizarro world, the wrong dominant coexisting timeline, absolutely this comes with the ultimate danger of destroying our planet all over again through either nuclear warfare, nuclear accident. It's very doubtful that it's going to come from an asteroid strike. It's 99.99% guaranteed it's going to be nuclear. And we can even see, as our wrong dominant coexisting timeline bizarro world is moving forward, the threat of nuclear destruction has leaped to the forefront yet again.
Yeah.
Okay.
It definitely
it had been squelched. It had been squelched for a while.
Yes.
And then when the wrong dominant timeline became the big bizarro world, the obvious bizarro world, that nuclear danger. So this is what is so terrible. Now, I thought about this long and hard. I know that a lot of people have been, over the years, been very, very concerned about the state of the world and the rulership of the world. And believe me, there's never going to be a perfect world here. I know that just about everybody wants that. It can't be possible because we're built on the remnants of what we were, but we certainly can be the best and better form of who we are.
Definitely. It doesn't have to be perfect. I don't believe it can be perfect here either. Before I even met you and even saw your work, I think if you'd reached perfection, you probably wouldn't be existing here, just frequency wise anymore.
Right.
You'd probably end up somewhere else out of bizarro world anyway.
Right. So basically, whether it was when the core matrix first resurrected us and put us online in the way back, that, by the way, is called the Big Bang, folks. When the core matrix flipped the light switch on, that was the Big Bang. And you just have to understand that because humans are rebuilt from the remnants of what we were, in fact, the entire universe, and that includes the ETs, everything and everyone, humans come without an owner's manual. Humans don't know where they come from, how the universe works. Mm-hmm. Everything is superstition and, odd science and odd beliefs. That's why we can be so manipulated.
Yeah, because we don't have a unified truth.
We don't have a unified truth.
We have lots of different stories. And beliefs. We have lots of beliefs and stories, but not the truth that unifies us.
Right. And speaking of stories, this ET bioengineering goes back into the history of this planet. It's being told through the Sumerian clay tablets. It's being told through oral traditions of ancient peoples. You can find this information, and it's been out there for quite some time. But I mean, I'm saying that I wasn't the first to realize this, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But on January the 6th, 2021, I realized that if we were going to have any chance of fixing being in bizarro world, the wrong dominant coexisting timeline, we needed the assistance and the involvement of the very people who kicked this off thousands of years ago, the ETs. And so I put out a poster, you can see it here. And I said, if you could see what I see, ETs are here. They live here. They have for thousands of years. They are watching the dangerous folly of humans, and they're not immune to what such folly can bring. They must uncloak. Now, what do I mean by that? Extraterrestrials, those that survived the war that they began, that were resurrected from the core matrix prime directive reboot thousands of years ago, they're here. They cannot go home. They use a certain type of energy, magnetic systems that either were destroyed during this war or just are not functional. They can move in their ships around the solar system and around the planet, but they cannot leave the solar system. The solar system is surrounded by a very powerful force field, a magnetic force field. They can't get through it, but also they cannot create, I'll call them wormholes, that they can move to zip to other parts of the universe. They're trapped here. Now, whether or not there are any original ETs that were, left that are still alive, they did have a very long lifespan, hundreds to thousands of years, some of them. But most definitely, probably, who is left here are their descendants. Most of them will be pure blood from their own races, and others will be hybrids, hybrids with humans. Some of them who look human, some of them live, work, are amongst humans. They're here, and you wouldn't know it. And
well,
others,
I just want to say here that even though a lot of, normies, as I lovingly call them, in the past haven't believed in this, just recently, there's been a lot of UFO stories in the press coming out, in the newspapers in England, as an example. They are really starting to change the narrative just recently, I've noticed. I just wanted to mention that because I find it an interesting point at this time.
That's right. Absolutely. Which brings me to the next thing, because after I posted this on January the 6th, 2021, people should remember that date because of what I posted here and what I asked of the ETs. I mean, come on, folks. I'm just like hoping somebody's watching, reading, like wishful thinking there, but something happens. Within 2 days, on January the 8th, 2021, the ETs did uncloak in space, as seen on the SOHO LASCO space satellite and cameras out there in space. Okay. And take a look at this panel here.
So I just have to say, so they're picking up your messages from all the way over there, Starfire.
Let me just say that there is an appearance of that. It's an appearance of that. I can't say that that's what happened, because
but they know you look at these cameras. That's what I find funny. So you put the post, but they know if they follow your work and they are watching you at all and your information out of interest, that they would know that you in particular would see that message, right? I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that.
Right. It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
You are correct. All those facts that you just mentioned are true. And the fact that I published that on January the 6th, 2021. And then if you look at this, this photo, this is the SOHO C2 camera. That's the orange tinged one. You can see on the right, there is a coronal mass ejection, or a CME. And there it is. You can see that beam. That is a directed energy beam that is probably at least 1 million miles long.
Wow.
Okay. I did the math on it. And it's got, and there on the right, I did a cropping and a blow up. But by the way, this photo that you are seeing comes from a movie. This is an image that I grabbed. It's unretouched. What you see is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did a cropping, and on the right, you can see what looks to be spirals and alternating colors. Now, when images of space are taken by the SOHO cameras, there is always going to be some sort of a lens artifact. In other words, what we are looking at, it's being interpreted by this lens. And this is important because I'm going to share with you what the images on these cameras look like, the C2 and the C3 cameras. I'm going to show you what natural things in space look like, and then which ones people have claimed were UFOs and they're not.
Oh, that's great, because I think it's so important for people to be able to differentiate. So when they're out there in internet land and they're just seeing all these videos, they'll be able to know for themselves. They'll be able to fact check it themselves with this information, won't they, Starfire?
That's right. One of the most dangerous and harmful things that has been around when it comes to ET and UFO disclosure, and you mentioned the more recent disclosures that the U.S. MIL has taken what they're calling authentic, unidentified flying objects.
The pyramid UFO came out the other day, but from a Navy ship, I think. Yeah, they've been disclosing.
Right. That's still, there's a question mark on that, but what you're going to be seeing as we show you more of this is it's really important before we show you a real, authentic, believe it, extraterrestrial craft or possibly space station in space taken by these cameras. It's important that you see what the other camera images look like, so that you can never be fooled again, because hoaxers destroy disclosure. Hoaxers in any field destroy the truth.
That's right.
I want every one of our time chroniclers to get educated in all of these things, and also so that when you do see the actual ET craft, you're going to know beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is the real deal.
That's right.
Okay. So this spiraling curlicue that you're seeing here in this SOHO image, this is the beam, and then it's involved in kicking off this coronal mass ejection. There's also another interesting thing, because coronal mass ejections, when the energy hits the Earth, can create geomagnetic storms. But more importantly, this energy hitting the Earth creates what's called frame dragging. This is from Albert Einstein, by the way. Frame dragging does, and has been proven even more recently, to distort or warp space and time. So frame dragging is one of the major triggers of creating a time shift. And when a time shift happens, the core matrix can take advantage of that, and from that create timeline edits and timeline reboots. So the fact that this ET energy beam was involved in triggering this coronal mass ejection behavior, which in turn allowed the core matrix to create timeline edits, even the ETs are trying to be helpful in their own way of fixing Bizarro World, because they live here too.
So even they know it's Bizarro World.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, like I said, some of them live in it on surface. A lot of them are underwater or in mountains or underground. Okay. As a matter of fact, in an upcoming episode, we're going to be talking about Skinwalker Ranch and what goes on there. Oh, yeah. Okay. So let's take a look at the SOHO spacecraft and the LASCO cameras, because this is where all the action is being recorded. So now it's really important to understand what that camera is. And as you can see, it's a satellite. Take a look at it. It's a little guy. And this spacecraft is so cleverly designed. Kudos to the scientists, the engineers, and the brains behind this who put this out there. This is not ET technology. This is humans doing it on their own, being brilliant.
Awesome.
Okay?
Yeah, yes.
Now this satellite, the SOHO satellite, and their LASCO camera started to be developed in the 1980s. It was launched in the mid-1990s and became operational in 1996. This is 2021. Okay. Now, SOHO really was only thought to maybe last a couple of years or so. And then after a couple of years, it went silent. And then it came back to life. Let's just chalk it up to something. And the really smart people, NASA and ESA, that's the European Space Association, NASA being the US, have been keeping this wonderful, beneficial satellite and cameras operational for all of these years. Now, the International Space Station orbits the Earth at around 220 miles above the Earth. This SOHO satellite is 930,000 miles away from Earth, or 1,506 kilometers away from Earth. Think about that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's mind-blowing. Yeah, they did a great job to get it out there.
And it's in this brilliant type of orbit that keeps it in almost 24/7 constant view of the Earth-facing side of the sun.
It's almost like a gift from them to you, Starfire, for your research.
And thank you so very much.
Thank you, NASA.
And ESA, yes.
And ESA, thank you so much for your donation.
Yes, it was really wonderful. So there originally were three, to me, the most important LASCO cameras, C1, C2, and C3. C1, sadly, was lost. The people who keep this beauty going do not dare do an upgrade. 1980s, 1990s tech, an upgrade might just knock it out.
Yeah.
So we're so fortunate that they keep this going. Now, last statistic people need to know about this is that with SOHO being away from the Earth 930,000 miles or 1.5 million kilometers from the Earth, the sun itself is roughly 93 million miles or 149 plus million kilometers from the Earth. So the SOHO is much closer to Earth, obviously, than it is to the sun. Okay, now here we go. We're going to be looking at natural space activity as it's seen on the SOHO cameras. In the left image, you're seeing what is a heavy swarm of solar energetic particles. These happen to have been caused by a very powerful X 2.6 solar flare.
Wow, it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And it can even get more dense than that so that everything is obliterated. Okay. Now, the center image, the left image and the right image are orange tinted. That's the C2 telescope and lenses.
Right.
The blue one is the C3, and it has a much wider field of view. Now, I chose to show this particular one in the center because you can see the planet Venus, and then you see a little lighter swarm of solar energetic particles. Solar energetic particles have very often been claimed to be UFOs. No. Okay, but this planet Venus, along with other planets, have often been misidentified as spacecraft.
Yes.
Around the sun.
Yeah.
Folks, let me assure you, this is the planet Venus. Now, but why does it look like that? Okay, in brief, planets are big objects, but they have no light of their own, just like the Earth, no light. So the light that the planet gets, the reason why we can see them in the night sky is because they are reflecting back the light from the sun. Now, the camera lens, this is an artifact, a camera lens artifact of the SOHO cameras, interprets these various natural things in space in its own unique way. In this case, when we have this bright glow from a planet, it gets something called pixel bleed. And that pixel bleed causes that long horizontal line of light on either side of the planet, looking a little bit like a saucer. It's not. It's just a camera artifact. Okay, matter of fact, and I won't say any names. I know that recently there's a certain person who's been collecting a lot of attention, claiming that the planet Venus is a ET craft. And I find that damaging and sad. Third one is, you see those little black boxes on the C2?
Yeah, I see those.
Right. Sometimes there's one little black box. Sometimes there's a whole bunch of black boxes put together, making interesting patterns. And sometimes the box can be orange or a combination of shades of orange. What that is a digital dropout.
Yes.
I mean, these images are coming almost 1 million miles away from the Earth. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're coming in as real time as possible. So digital dropouts will happen. And when that happens, their computer fills it in with those, just a dark image. Digital dropouts can also be an indicator that there's been a timeline edit. Not all of them, but some of them. Okay, so let's move on to the next. Here's more natural space activity as seen on the SOHO cameras. On the left, this is a beauty. What looks to be an angel or something odd is really a sun diving comet. When comets get kind of close to the sun, the gravity of the sun pulls them in. And so they're called sun diving. Some of them go right into the sun, and that's the end of them. Others of them go and are boomeranged around the sun to come out the other side, sort of like a partial orbit because of the gravity. But this is what it looks like. This is how the camera lens is interpreting it. So you get this interesting artifact, but this is a comet, not a UFO. Okay. In the middle, we have a C2. You have another view of what a sun diving comet can look like. You see solar eruptions happening all around it. And on the very left, you see this sort of bright dash. That's a solar energetic particle, not a UFO. Okay. And on the right, wow, look at this.
It's beautiful. It's
These
amazing.
Are the ones, right. These are the ones that you go, what? But what it actually is, these are when energetic solar particles come close to the camera, and the closer they are to the camera lens, they get distorted, they get very bright, and they get this way. But if you notice, not one single one of them is a spiral formation. Not one single one of these artifacts that I've just showed you of actual real things going on in space, none of them look like the ET energy beam that struck the sun back on January 8th, 2021. You can just go back and look at it by pausing this, going back, looking at it, and then moving back to this point in time in our podcast. Okay, moving on to another natural space activity as seen on SOHO cameras. All of these are C2. There is another view of what a sun diving comet can look like. Again, as you see, it's not a spiral, it's a solid formation. And the closer it gets to the sun, the farther it gets from the camera lens, which is why it's wider on the left. And as it reaches the sun, it's a narrower beam. The one in the middle, well, there was a meteor shower at the time that this was taken, as it happens. And this is what it looks like when meteors, as they're zipping out there in space, get kind of close to the camera lens. And this is how the camera interprets them. Okay. Mm-hmm. And on the right, this is a very powerful halo X flare. Many X flares happening one after the other on this fantastic date, April 5th, 2014. And that's what that looks like. And depending on what phase of this type of a halo X flare happens, it gives off lots of interesting lights and spectaculars, and they're all connected to this CME, not a UFO, not an energy beam from an extraterrestrial, nothing of that nature. But now in the next frame, what we're seeing are some of the unexplained SOHO camera anomalies. Mm-hmm. And I don't want people to think that everything as seen on the SOHO cameras can be explained away. So far, they have not been. I'm open. Explain it to me. But I'm a scientist. I've studied, thousands of hours. I know about these camera artifacts. And these three are very strange. The one on the left, that's from 1999.
Yeah, they're all different dates. I was just checking out the dates. They're very spread apart, aren't they, these ones?
They are. They're not found that often. They're rare. I do look for them. Like I said, I spend thousands of hours scanning not just this data, but loads of other scientific data as well. Practically my entire life is spent into this research. Yep. It's gone into this podcast. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the one on the left is particularly interesting because it's got these spiral concentric little circles going on there. Mm-hmm. But all of them are noticeable because they appear to be like a couple of columns or 3 columns sort of put together like a sandwich. But the one in the middle and the one on the right are even more interesting because they bend.
Yeah, like a boomerang.
Like a boomerang. And this is a bending of light. What's doing it? I thought, well, could this be something within the camera or the lens that's a reflection of it? And the answer is no. Or else it would be there all the time. Mm-hmm. The conditions would be there all the time, but they're not. So the bending of this light is very interesting, particularly since you can see in these images that the magnetic streams coming off of the sun are straight. They're all straight. So if something was bending light that was some action of the lens, some peculiarity to it, everything would be bending. All the light would be bending, but they're not, just these forms. So I'm just pointing that out. Okay. Now, in the next panel, now I'm going to show you space items that are seen in SOHO images that are not UFOs. These are not time portals. They are not wormholes. They are not cosmic beings out there. Yet all of these frames have been claimed to be so.
It's not the 5th dimension ascending out through the sun.
No, it's not. The sun is a very powerful and wonderful thing, but claiming that these natural things are UFOs, time portals, wormholes, cosmic beings is false. Okay. On the left, I took this off of a newspaper claim from April the 24th, 2012. So this is a cropped image of what are actually solar energetic particles that have been wrongly promoted as a giant UFO in space. That I said made the papers. They were on the TV news, broadcast every which way. But this often happens, as I showed you in prior photos. These solar energetic particles, they can go all over the place. And sometimes they crisscross each other, or they appear to. This is a forced perspective. In other words, all of these solar particles, well, they could be 1 million or 2 million miles apart, or 3 million kilometers apart. So that's what it looks like. Now, I went back and I found the original image of that, and you can see it in the center panel. There it is. It's uncropped, unenhanced. I didn't do anything to it. And there it is. Those are the solar energetic particles. And as you can see from the panel in the middle and the panel on the right, this was really the beginning of a very powerful coronal mass ejection. This is where the solar energetic particles came from. This is where they sourced from. So by just showing a cropped image and going, wow, look, folks, this looks like and then you say from Star Trek, from Star Wars, from some sci-fi movie.
And don't forget, you have to put some interesting backing music to it to make it sound very suspenseful.
But we're not doing that.
No.
Right. So what I've done is I've gone back and I've put that image into context. And now that's not a UFO. Here's where it comes from. Mystery solved. Okay. The next panel. This is one of the more egregious hoaxes that have been pulled, that have been picked up by the news media.
Yeah, and I know that I shared with you that me and my daughter, we like to sort of look at the sun cams, the SOHO sun cams now. It's a bit of fun. She sees mummy doing it. She wants to do it too. So I like to spend time with her looking for spacecraft or anomalies. And we found ourselves some things that look like this. And, at first glance, you think it might be a ship. If you don't know, if you didn't know any better, they can look very similar.
Right. And, I think it's so great that you're sharing this with your young daughter.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's not only fun. I mean, I think it's fun.
I love it.
But, and I'm glad that you and your daughter do, but you're also teaching her reality. Yeah, okay. Reality is much stranger than all these hoaxes.
Exactly. We don't need to make stuff up here in Bizarro World.
But some people who love their clickbait love to make hoaxes up, whether they are doing it because they're just uneducated or whether they really do know and they're just faking it. I leave that to all of you to figure out, but I want to focus on this particular hoax.
Yes.
This is from January 2003. And as you can see in this is an actual clip from the newspaper article. This person, who's I will not name, claimed that he found a spacecraft, a UFO, a spacecraft around the sun. And there's on the bottom is what I recognize as SOHO timestamps, time and date stamp. Let's go to the next panel, okay? So what you're seeing here is what I did was I knew what this was. I knew that this person had used enhancements to create the look of a UFO where there was none. Mm-hmm. So I'm using this as an example. And by the way, I go through this to check out whether I can authenticate something as natural or unnatural being it's not an energetic particle or a coronal mass ejection or something like that. So here I've actually debunked this false UFO claim. On the left, you can see I cropped out just the image that this hoaxer was putting out, and this is what the paper had. I found the original image, that's on the right, and I've circled in red the solar energetic particle that this person was claiming was a UFO, okay? This is completely the one on the right with the green with the little red circled solar energetic particle. In fact, Pigtail Gurl, this is very similar to something that you and your daughter discovered and asked me about.
That's right. That's why it was reminding me of that.
Yeah, right. Okay. So let's go to the next panel, please.
And great. We're so grateful that Auntie Starfire was able to explain to us what they really were.
I'm just an educator at heart. Okay. Well, I did teach science at one point, so I guess I'm still teaching it. So I did this myself to show you how this person faked an energetic solar particle to be a UFO.
Yeah, because for most people, seeing is believing, right? So if you can fake the image, you can put ideas in people's brain because seeing is believing for most people.
Right. And so by educating them in what we're just educating them in, they're not going to be fooled by this. So when they see the real thing, which is what we're going to show them in a moment, they're going to know that what they're seeing is the real deal. Okay. So there on the left is just miniaturized versions of what we just showed in the panels before. And so here is how this person created a fake UFO from a natural solar energetic particle. I did an extreme blow up and a cropping of the original little speck. You see a little speck on the left, that solar energetic particle? Well, that's what it looks like blown up. Okay. Now, remember what I told you about how the camera lens creates these elongated pixels of things? Well, that's an example of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Then using my good old Photoshop, and I manipulated the image. I manipulated it using Photoshop to create the second looking form. Now it's getting a little bit more saucer looking, right?
Mm-hmm. And was that like a negative? Was it put into like a negative?
Nope. It's just trial and error. I just tried out various adjustments of color,
right,
hues, tinting, and I have a program that can allow me to change things up. I don't want to say specifically what it is because I don't want to educate people on how to create.
Yes, don't give them any
specifically
ideas.
Create hoaxes, right? Okay. And then in the third one, I was able to create a near identical one. In fact, I purposefully created different colors than the hoaxer did. As you can see, mine has a green outline, his has the red one, because I wanted to show you that I really did it myself. This is my own version of it. So this is how the hoaxer did it. Went from an solar energetic particle to a fake UFO claim. Okay. Now, before we move on to what we need to show you, please keep all of what you just learned in mind. Is actually something that we showed in our last podcast episode. It's important that you know this because something happened before that show was recorded and after the show was recorded. And you need to know about this because it's everything. It's the key to everything. When this was originally put up, I used it to show that a core matrix timeline edit was caught on camera, caught on the SOHO camera, the C2 SOHO camera. This is what it looks like. This is to the engineers on the ground. This to them is a digital dropout, and it is. But this type is created from a core matrix timeline edit event. Okay, so I create these panels, but Pigtail Gurl proofs everything. She looks at the images, she looks at what I wrote, and she makes sure that I haven't made any mistakes, or she may have a question, or she may want something added or taken away. You know, she's the eyes and ears of the public. So as it turns out, in this particular panel, I made a mistake, a big one. I reversed the two panels. The one on the left I put on the right, and the one on the right I put on the left, and that puts them out of time sequence. I don't know how I made that kind of mistake, but I was pretty tired, and I just went, okay, I made a mistake.
Yeah, because you work 100 hours, dear. That's why.
Right, in a 24-hour day. So, but at no time when I made it, during the proofing, when I corrected it, reproofed again by Pigtail Gurl, at no time did we see the extraterrestrial spacecraft or possibly space station that is smack in the middle of the center photo. We're going to show you more about
this. What happened, Starfire? What happened?
Well, this is part of a timeline edit, and we had a series of them because we're in the wrong dominant coexisting timeline, bizarro world. We've had almost nonstop core matrix timeline edits going on, trying to fix the problem so that it can retire the wrong timeline and put in, let's say, a core matrix approved timeline. Like I said, not perfect, but definitely not bizarro world.
Right.
So this really amazed me because of the thousands and thousands of hours that I have spent from the initiation of this satellite going online back in the mid-90s. I'd never seen that before. And I do look for them. And every time someone claims that they've, that SOHO has caught a UFO on camera, I do look at it. And never once has any of those claims been true. Not UFOs, not wormholes, not time portals, nothing of that nature. No.
Not Planet X.
Not Planet X, correct. So I took the November the 3rd, 2020 image that you just saw in the previous panel, and I cropped. Well, first of all, I circled in red the extraterrestrial ship or spacecraft in red, so you had no trouble spotting it. And then I did a crop and an enlargement on the right. Other than that, there's been no enhancement and no retouching of these photos, and they are taken from a movie. Okay. Here is from November the 11th, also shown in the same previous podcast. And just like the other one, I didn't make a mistake on reversing these, but neither Pigtail Gurl and I noticed the very obvious extraterrestrial craft.
Yes, had it been there, we would have noticed, wouldn't we? We would have noticed.
Not only would we have noticed, we would have been talking about it.
Exactly.
But we didn't. Mm-mm. This was all about a timeline edit, which turns out to be the reason why it's suddenly there. Timeline edits, and the craft is uncloaked. Now, when you're looking at that extraterrestrial craft or possibly space station, you're looking at it in silhouette. So I went and I grabbed known three-dimensional objects that move around in space and what they look like in silhouette. So on the left, you see the extraterrestrial craft. In the middle, that's the U.S. space shuttle. So there it is in silhouette around 220 miles above the planet. And that's what it looks like in real life. As you can see, it's the difference between silhouette and 3D is quite a lot. On the right panel, that's the International Space Station. And on the left in the middle, that's the same space shuttle that's now hooked up to it at a slight angle. And on the bottom of that one, you can see what the International Space Station actually looks like 220 miles above planet Earth. These silhouettes that are so much closer to the planet and our cameras, they're much more crisp. The edges are more crisp. But when you look at the silhouette of the extraterrestrial spacecraft or space station, it's not quite as crisp. But here's what I want everybody to understand. Part of what I just shared with you before, the SOHO satellite and its LASCO cameras are 930,000 miles and 1 million kilometers from the Earth. It's constantly looking at the sun. It doesn't look back at the Earth. So when it's taking a photo, a movie and a photo of that extraterrestrial spacecraft, it's in front of the camera. It's somewhere between the camera and the sun.
And it's hard to exactly tell what distance it might be.
Cannot tell. Cannot tell. Okay. So we really don't know the size, but if you take a look at these other silhouette objects that are recognizable, that we know what they look like in 3D, when you look at the extraterrestrial craft, you can kind of make out that this is very three-dimensional. There seem to be spheres, globes of some sort, round things in the front, the back. I don't know what the front of the back is, but
it reminds me kind of like a fish kind of creature thing. Well, with a tail and then a body at the front, head.
Right. Well, because it's a silhouette, we really don't know what it looks like when we're looking at it without it being a silhouette. But you can sort of make out that there are spherical large globes positioned in various places on this thing. That's why I wondered if it wasn't just a ship, it might be a space station. But I don't know the answer to that at all. All right. Now, before we go on to the next panel, what you are about to see, well, things are going to get even more amazing, because I just didn't find this ET craft uncloaked on these images on November 3rd, 2020 and November 11th, 2020. I found them going back as far back as 1996. And I'm going to show you some of those shots. It's amazing. This object may have been in this position in space ever since that extraterrestrial war.
Wow.
Okay. And I want people to think about another thing. In these ancient texts and stories we've been told about, particularly from India, they have something called Vimana. We have people talking about cities floating in the sky and that the extraterrestrials or their gods came down from them. My question is, could this be one of those cities? That's been moved off-world? Okay, let's go on to the next panel, please.
I think it's a possibility.
Okay, good. So here we have the November 3rd, 2020, November 11th, 2020, and a new one for you, September 12th, 2001. Now, we all know that September 11th, 2001 is a very terrible but special date in history. So for me to find this craft back then on those dates, I'm just going to leave it there. But they've uncloaked. And I put these three together, November 3rd, 2020, November 11th, 2020, and September 12th, 2001. As you can see, that craft appears to be in the same position. But if you look above it at the array of what the panel is, what SOHO is photographing, they're all different. So this is typical of a timeline edit where the core matrix is using the elements. It keeps what works, it takes away what doesn't, it pulls in more things. And this is an example of that. This is why there's a similarity, but different. Okay. All right. Let's move to the next panel, please. There's that craft again, but September 8th, 2001. This is a few days before September 11th, 2001. If you notice, the spacecraft or space station is slightly moved. It's changed position. On the right, I have one from January 1st, 2021. It's back in what I call its usual position. And in the middle, I did a crop and enlargement of a September 8th, 2001 version of it, as you can see it there. And also of the January 1st, 2021. As you can see, this is the same, or if not the same, an exact identical craft positioned there.
It looks pretty much the same, to be honest, doesn't it? And that proves that it really is a something and not an artifact or something strange on the camera lens, because it's repeatedly there, the same shape.
I'm very glad that you brought that up. This is very important for everyone to understand. What you are looking at is not a speck on the lens. It's not some defect on the interior of the lens from 1996 to 2021. If it were, it would be in every frame, but it's not. It's only in some of the frames and only when there's been a timeline edit. And so far, from what I was able to find from 1996 to 2021, they've only appeared in the C2, the orange tinted ones. And there's a reason for that. And we're going to find out very shortly. Okay, please move on to the next panel. These are sort of freaky looking. Well, these are from April 19th, 1996 and April 29th, 1996. As you can see, this is from early on when SOHO Lasco went online. These are some of the first images, and these are near the first time that I ever saw these. In other words, I went back once I saw that they had uncloaked and that this was going to exist. I went back and I searched through every single frame from 1996 to today.
And do you think before a timeline edit, they weren't appearing in the photos? And since this timeline edit, they're now appearing in all the photos? Is that what you're saying?
That's what's happened. I'm just calling it the way it is. Mm-hmm. And we know that because we have the evidence, physical, because we showed those panels and it wasn't there, or else we would have mentioned it. I mean, it was like the elephant in the room. and we have mentioned it, but look at how freaky these timeline edits look. These are major digital dropout, freaky stuff going on, but we can see that they're different. They're like 10 days apart. They're different, but the craft is the same. Mm-hmm. And there I have in the middle the crop blowups. Okay, so that proves that I have now found them from 1996 to 2021. This is not just a little piece of debris on the lens or some defect inside the lens. Like I said, they'd be on every frame, and they are not. Okay, please go to the next frame, Pigtail Girl. Great. This is where things take one step farther into the Twilight Zone, and which what I'm thinking brings us back to what we originally were talking about, being in the wrong coexisting dominant timeline and bizarro world. And the ETs and their war and the time looping and the core matrix reboot, all of it's connected. For the very first time ever, I found the ET ship in the C3 blue SOHO image.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, there it is. And as you can see, it's turned around. It's in a different direction. And what people are going to see, let's go to the next panel. This is really important. The C2 orange tinted panel is kind of a medium close-up of space and the sun. So our field of view of space is around 5.25 million miles or 8.4 million kilometers wide. But the C3 image is a lot bigger. It shows a 30 million mile or 45 million kilometer expanse of space. So what I did was I made the C2 orange tinted one that has the ET ship in it. I had to put little arrows, you could see where it was. I put them as they actually would look side by side, so that you can see that when the craft, the ET craft, changes position, it's actually a lot bigger and it's a lot farther out. I did some calculations, some math here, and I figured out that the ET ship has moved at the least 2 million miles or more, or 3.22 million kilometers from where it had been in the C2 image. And in just about all of the images that I previously showed you in the C2 images. Suddenly, on April the 15th, 2021, and we're recording this on the 18th of April, 2021.
Right.
Suddenly, this craft is on the move.
Wow.
Now, I'll tell you something else. It's larger, as I said, because it's closer to the camera. This ET ship just didn't move. It's moved toward the camera. That's why it's larger.
Now, usually when we see it, it's during a timeline edit, isn't it? Because behind it, it seems to be this white ring of energy that's like a backdrop that shows it up. But when it's moving through space, though, is it either cloaked or is the camera just wouldn't pick it up?
Well, that's something I think about a lot. Actually, we see it mostly during the timeline edit. This white that you see is part of the digital dropout that caused by the timeline edit. But as you can see in previous panel, back from 1996 and before that, sometimes a ship shows up within the orange region. So it's not just the white, but I also caught it in the orange region. So it's more to do with the timeline edit than it is with anything else. And it is a silhouette, and it follows the same properties as any of the silhouettes, whether it's a space station, the space shuttle, or an extraterrestrial craft. But here's the thing that I'm thinking about, and I want everyone to be thinking about. Why has this craft or space station, or who knows, space city, why is it on the move?
Yeah, because it seems it hasn't moved from where it's been for quite some time.
Well, the SOHO cameras on a good day only snap an image every 12 minutes. So, and then I say on a good day because a lot of days there can be hours missing from it. So it's very rare to catch these. They may be in a lot more. They may have been in this position that we're seeing here now on the screen in previous, but not that I have been able to catch. So I can only go by what I know.
Right.
And what I know is that since the call to uncloak, and in various posts I made it, on my various social media pages, I made it very clear that in order for us to get out of Bizarro World, we really do need ET involvement. Mm-hmm. We really can't do this without them. The ETs cannot control the core matrix, nor can humans or anybody else. They cannot do timeline edits. They cannot do time shifts. But when I say help, right now, it's very much up to humans to realize that we are in Bizarro World and to desire not to be in it, and to take those steps that help the core matrix to solidify a better dominant timeline. So seeing that we have this extraterrestrial ship which has moved position closer to the Earth. How close? I don't know. I just know that it's moved at least 2 million miles from its previous position, and it's moved in the direction of the camera, which means that it's moved in the direction of the Earth. We'll keep everybody updated, Pigtail Gurl, as things develop.
Yes. If we catch more images, we might be able to ascertain how much they're moving because they're going to eventually past the camera, won't they? I mean, they'll get a point where they'll disappear, but that'll be for in some time still.
Right. Well, we have almost 1 million miles of space between the Earth and the satellite. So, and it only has a certain range, right. A field of view. So I don't know if I'm going to catch anything more. I'm suspecting, because I'm such an eagle eye at this, and because I'm so, let's say, connected to this, mm-hmm. that if it's there, I'll find it. I'll be the one. And we also may see the evidence of this in an uptick in authentic ET activity on the planet. What that ET activity will be, well, we'll see. I certainly don't dictate what that activity is going to be. I have ideas of what it should be. I certainly do. And if any of them would like to consult me, hey, I'll be glad to. But this is just from my experience speaking. So are we going to see this ship come into port here? Are we going to see it hovering in orbit here? Or?
Well, it seems to me, it seems to be quite a large, whatever it is. It seems to be quite large. I would imagine.
It is.
It seems
correct.
So to bring it close to the Earth, I don't think if it was a sort of station place where they would exist, they might have smaller ships, right, that they would come out to come and see us. I don't know if they're going to land.
There are lots of smaller ships.
Yeah.
And they zip around all the time. But the show of force and superiority over those who are ruling over Bizarro World right now, it would be a sight to see if a ship or a space station that large,
a city in the sky,
became a city in the sky.
Yeah.
This would be helpful, in my opinion, mm-hmm. under the right circumstances. We'll have to see how this progresses. It's extremely important. I don't know how much of human UFO disclosure can be useful if the ETs themselves don't come in and say, yeah, that's us. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next panel, please.
And of course, we're inviting them onto the Time Chronicles, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely.
They're welcome here to say hi.
Any language, any images.
Exactly.
Any way you'd like to do it. Broadcast it through the cosmos. We're good with that.
We're all inclusive.
We are. Okay. So this next panel, folks, we've saved possibly the best for last. Yeah. As if you didn't think that showing you the evidence of this incredible extraterrestrial craft from 1996 to 2021 wasn't incredible, mind-blowing, unique. This next thing proves, once again, but in the most spectacular of ways, what I've been teaching about the core matrix and timeline edits and how they work.
Mm-hmm. It sure does. My mind was well and truly blown by this one. I'm so excited to have it here for all the Time Chroniclers at home.
Absolutely. Back on March the 2nd of 2021, as I was going through my routine of looking at the movies, the SOHO movies, my eye caught something. Now, I look at these movies in a very special way. I have a way of looking at them so that I can take in variables and fractions of changes that someone else might not be aware of because they're looking at it in a different way. Okay. What I saw was the planet Venus. You can see the planet Venus right there on the right side of the image. I have 4 panels there. The planet Venus moves. It jerks back. And I mean a big lot of difference. It's obvious. But when I grab the most important of the still frames from that and I put them together, you really can't tell. Now, I knew that this was involved with a timeline edit because I could see the digital dropout in the 2 middle panels. So I got in touch with Pigtail Gurl and I explained the problem. And I said, hey, I want you to look at this film and see if you see what I'm seeing. So we both looked at it and she saw what I saw, the planet Venus jumping quite a distance. So I asked her if she could grab this piece of film because I wanted to show it to you folks, because I knew that you needed to see the film to understand the immensity of this unique evidence of my discoveries and work, which is also connected to this bizarro world that we're in. These are part of the timeline edits. So you really can't tell in these still images. I just want you to see the timestamp on them. And now what you're going to see now that Pigtail Gurl is going to put here for you is the actual unretouched, non-rehanced in any way C3 SOHO Lasco video from March the 2nd, 2021. And I believe, Pigtail Gurl, you're going to loop it. So it's going to repeat 3 times, right?
Yeah, that's right. And people will be able to see it a few times so they can really see that how it moves.
Right. And of course, they can always pause the podcast anywhere, go back and look at something and start it up again. Okay, let's show this fantastic piece of evidence.
Wow, absolutely mind-blowing.
Isn't it? You just stare at the planet Venus and boom. And that leap, that's like, potentially millions of miles.
It seems so small to watch it on the screen, yet it's like that one small step, but one giant leap for mankind. Because really, that tiny little jump that it seems to make on that screen, it's just impossible. There's no logical explanation for a planet to make any kind of movement backwards and forwards within a video. There's no explanation. Even if it just looks like a tiny movement on the screen to us, to that planet, that was a huge movement, right?
Right. And as you can see, the background remains, the same. So this is typical of a timeline edit. Things move, things changed.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're not meant to notice it, but because of a timeline edit and the digital dropouts and the way that I do find this evidence, there it is.
There it is.
There it is.
Only on the Time Chronicles.
Only on the Time Chronicles. So to wrap up the show, it's really important, and I know that you and I are very gung-ho about this. We want to take a positive, proactive view of everything that's going on with being in the wrong dominant coexisting timeline and with our bizarro world and the bizarro rulerships and bizarro thinking, and everything's Superman bizarro.
Well, yeah, where there is a will, there is a way. So really, the way I see it is together as united citizens of this beautiful planet Earth, we can somehow help the core matrix change the wrong dominant coexisting timeline, this bizarro world we find ourselves in, into just a much better and harmonic dominant coexisting timeline, one that we're going to enjoy. So we've really got to be the frequency.
That's right. You see, humans and ETs are a kindred people. It's been so since ancient times and into modern times because they bioengineered us. We have their genes in us. We're kindred because of that, and because we live on this planet together, we're in the solar system together, and we're part of the cosmos together. And it remains so from coexisting timeline to coexisting timeline. All coexisting timelines exist in the same space and are only separated by their own individual frequencies. Everything works on frequency. So, to help the core matrix get out of this wrong dominant coexisting timeline, be the frequency.
Howdy, Time Chroniclers. If you enjoy this podcast, we need your help. Please consider donating today to the Time Chronicles podcast. Just visit the GoFundMe link found in the description box.
Your support will help us bring you more great and unique shows like this one. I guarantee you there is no other podcast like this on the net. So please support us. We appreciate it.